with an unprecedented and shameful public display by President Trump, revealing a new low in his corruption of the Justice Department and his attack on the rule of law. Trump going to the DOJ itself, which presidents almost never do, to the very place where the decision was made to investigate and prosecute him for his alleged crimes. He gave an hour-long speech in which he called for his political enemies to be jailed, suggested that it should be, quote, illegal to criticize judges, and that it should be illegal to say that he lost the election.
People who did this to us should go to jail. A lot of the judges that I had, if you look at them, they take tremendous abuse. They take such abuse. And honestly, very simply, they're afraid of bad publicity. It should be illegal, and it probably is illegal. Newspapers are really no different than a highly paid political operative. And it has to stop. It has to be illegal. What a difference a rigged and crooked election had on our country when you think about it. And the people who did this to us should go to jail. They should go to jail.
Convicted felon Donald Trump giving this speech with his former defense lawyer sitting there next to him. That's Pam Bondi, who he tapped to be his attorney general. NBC News reporting that Bondi is now embracing Trump's efforts to politicize the DOJ when she explicitly promised that there would not be weaponization during her confirmation hearing. She is just one of the top DOJ officials that are in Trump's corner, many of them serving as his personal defense lawyers in the past. New Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who represented Trump during his New York trial, bragged about that today.
Enough has been said about what happened to him over the past 4 years. But I was right next to him. I stood next to him making that very stern, mean face that you saw. He was a complete inspiration to me personally.
Just wanted to fact check the reality that Blanche lost that trial. Trump is subverting decades of tradition, which the DOJ is nonpartisan. Officials there work for the United States. They do not work for the president. But so far, installing his loyalists has not helped Trump in court, facing far more losses than wins so far. Take a look at these from the last 3 weeks as judges are pushing back against Trump's legally murky agenda. Just 53 days into this administration, Trump now faces more than 120 lawsuits that are related to his executive actions. This week alone, we've seen 8 losses to just 1 win in court. This as he continues his purge at the Department of Justice, ousting more career officials in the last week. Joining me now is Alexis Loeb, former DOJ prosecutor who worked on January 6 cases, and Barrett Berger, a former federal prosecutor with the SDNY. My thanks to both of you for getting us started this evening. Alexis, I want to start with you. Trump called himself the chief law enforcement officer today, but he made it clear that he intends on prosecuting and punishing whom he deems to be his political enemies. But in many ways, you yourself, Alexis, would fall under the ambit of that. You prosecuted January 6 defendants who he called political prisoners, not only on the campaign trail, but again today. Your thoughts about what I think was the desecration or the continuing desecration of the DOJ today?
Well, the irony that the president keeps railing against the weaponization of the Justice Department is not lost on me because we have never seen weaponization like this before. This combination of installing loyalists and purging career officials, which has it's gone so far beyond anything we've seen with any previous administration, coupled with the targeting of political enemies, and not just political enemies, but even people he perceives as helping those political enemies, like the law firms representing them. And then finally, of course, impunity for those who support him. And I'm thinking of things like the pardoning of over 1,500 individuals who participated in the attack on the Capitol, and then the relaxing of enforcement, even of statutes that target corrupt foreign officials and companies who pay bribes.
So, Barrett, NBC News is reporting on how Attorney General Pam Bondi seems to be promoting Trump's agenda. Quote, the Trump administration, with Bondi's help, appears to be seeking to transform the Justice Department into a political instrument of the president, something that no Republican or Democratic administration has done since then President Richard Nixon. I mean, Barrett, you were a federal prosecutor. Your thoughts about what you witnessed today?
I mean, it's very interesting to hear the president call himself the chief law enforcement officer, because that actually is the role of the attorney general. It's interesting to me that Pam Bondi would just cede this role to the president. And the reason that folks like us that have worked in the Department of Justice are so surprised by the president's speech is because we never heard from the presidents when we worked in the Department of Justice. In fact, not only was it that the presidents weren't coming to give us this face-to-face talk, we didn't hear their names bandied about, because it was never about what a president's agenda was. It was never what the president's priority was. It was what the department needed. It was what the cases needed and what justice required. So the presidents simply weren't a presence in the Department of Justice in all the many years that I was there. Through various different attorneys generals, both Democratic and Republican, the president just simply wasn't a presence. So this is a huge sea change. And in today's speech, look, he had an opportunity to try to win back the hearts and minds of the folks at DOJ right now who are terrified. They're terrified for their jobs. They're terrified for their reputations. And nothing in this speech today would have given any of them any reason to not continue to be scared and to have faith in this Department of Justice.
I mean, Alexis, Trump's FBI director has been accused of having a, quote, enemies list. We're talking about Kash Patel there, but Attorney General Bondi maintains that this won't happen. Take a listen.
It's not an enemies list. That is a total mischaracterization.
There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Okay, but Alexis, I don't know how you can believe Pam Bondi when she's currently not only abiding by Trump's agenda, she's been a defense lawyer for him in the past. She's promoted the big lie that there was a stolen election. She supported him during his first impeachment trial. And now she stands there silently while he attacks the rule of law.
And I think if you look even just at one office, the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, you see that the targeting of enemies in this administration, unfortunately, is alive and well. I'm thinking of the demotion of senior prosecutors who worked on causes that the administration doesn't support. These are senior prosecutors with expertise in violent crime, national security, the kinds of things the administration says are its priorities, were moved to the office's misdemeanor units. And of course, over 15 prosecutors from that office were just outright fired, removing them from jobs where their day-to-day jobs were prosecuting public safety in Washington, D.C., something else that the administration says were its priorities. And we're seeing the same thing across the Department of Justice, where offices that have never been political are finding the people who head them up removed. I'm thinking of senior leaders in the National Security Division who have expertise in areas like the FISA statute and foreign surveillance, the kinds of expertise that it takes years to build. And these are positions that are not political positions. Those folks have found themselves reassigned or out of jobs. Same with in the antitrust division, people who prosecute price fixing, something that usually is prosecuted from administration to administration, also reassigned. So really just across the Department of Justice alone, I think you are seeing the target of enemies, to say nothing of things like the executive order in the last week that we saw targeting a law firm outside the Department of Justice, Perkins Coie.
Barrett, it makes you kind of wonder when you hear Alexis reel off all of the personnel and staffing changes that are happening, and they're substantive cuts. These are not just we're kind of trimming the fat. These are substantive cuts that affect the prosecutions of serious crimes across the country. You're seeing that Trump now has a massive losing record in court, losing more than he's winning in the courts. Look at all of these losses from the past 3 weeks. Barrett, I got to ask, does this mean, though, that the rule of law is actually holding the line when we see that Trump is losing so much?
I mean, it does seem that the court system is working. I would put an asterisk by that, though, because a lot of these are sort of temporary decisions. So for a lot of these decisions that we've seen, the courts are not actually ruling on the ultimate issue. They're ruling on the process or the procedure. For example, we saw this on, the two rulings that came out this week about the firing of numbers and thousands of probationary employees. The courts, two different district courts said, you can't do this in the way they did it. They bypassed certain procedures, and that in itself is not legal. They weren't actually ruling on the ultimate issue. And I think that's been a consistent theme through a lot of these early decisions that we've seen. It will be interesting to see if the justice system, actually continues to have these guardrails once courts start ruling finally on the ultimate issue here. But I do think it's interesting to your earlier point about, for a president that gets there and at DOJ today is talking about he is going to be the president of law and order, when he's taking a sledgehammer to the Department of Justice, firing so many people that actually have to bring the cases. You can't be the president of law and order unless you actually have people working for the Department of Justice to prosecute those cases. So those really do seem like inconsistent goals.